Hello, and welcome back to my channel. Or if you're new here, welcome to my channel. Now, today's video is going to be based on the blog post which I published today, the 17th of August, 2022. And this is part of my month-long celebration of my second favorite writer, Hermann Hesse. His 60th yahrzeit death anniversary was the 9th of August of 2022. So I'm showcasing his life and work on both my main blog and my YouTube channel this month. And let's continue with my personal ranking of his novels. And if you feel differently about some of them, obviously no hard feelings. If you disagree with my opinion, you loved a novel I hated or found unmemorable, or you hated a novel I absolutely loved, just leave a comment explaining your feelings. I really do like seeing comments from my viewers and subscribers. It helps me to become friends with more people here on BookTube and on AuthorTube. Now, the images of the books which I will be using to illustrate this video will be the mass market paperbacks, which were particularly popular in the US in, I guess, the 1960s and 1970s. And I'm using them because, except for three books, Gertrude, Beneath the Wheel, and Peter Commonson, those were, the ones which I first read Hesse's novels, and so I'm very, emotionally attached to them. And several of them I took from my father's collection of old books. That was how I discovered Hesse in the first place, when I first read Demian the summer I was 14 years old, and continued reading after I turned 15. Steppenwolf and the Glass Bead Game also came from my father's collection. And, I read from the library, brought some of my own copies in the mass market paperback. So even though, mass market paperback isn't really the trim size I'm most comfortable reading now because my eyes aren't what they used to be, it's, what I'm just emotionally attached to. And so let's just get down with it. Hesse's 1919 breakthrough novel, Demian, will always be my number one. I first read it from the summer of 1994 to February 1995, and it had such a huge impact on my life. Demian was also the first adult novel I read independently of school assignments. Everything about this book is absolutely perfect, and it speaks so deeply to the human condition. Particularly meaningful to me are Hesse's midrash about the mark of Cain being something positive, the mark of a nonconformist, unafraid to go against the crowd, and the concept of abraxas, a half-good, half-evil deity. And I just, cannot recommend this book enough. Obviously, for the sake of this video, I'm not going to be doing, blow-by-blow plot summaries and book reviews. I'm just basically saying, what I liked or what I didn't like about the book, just, each of the 11 novels in a nutshell. Narcissus and Goldmund, published in 1930, is another book that's had a huge impact on my life. I'm not alone in considering it Hesse's very finest. Many times through life, I've thought about Goldmund's discovery of the close linking of agony and ecstasy. I also love that it's set during the Middle Ages and includes the Black Plague. It also features the conflict between religious and secular life without judging or heavily favoring either. And Goldmund kind of draws from Hesse's own personal life, as many of his books do. He kind of had a crack up and ran away from a religious seminary and just decided to, have a secular life in the outside world, just like so many other things. Hesse himself did, some art on the side, although obviously he was a novelist first and foremost, but he did, doing drawing and painting and such. And so this is yet another book, one of the very, very, very finest. I just cannot recommend this book enough. Steppenwolf, published in 1927, is the third of Hesse's books, which most changed my life. I connected so much with Harry, who has such a one-track intellectual life of the mind. He doesn't even know how to laugh or dance, and looks poorly on people who aren't as serious and intellectual as he is. And also, like Harry, I share his disdain of the cookie cutter, mindless bourgeoisie that's not just a lifestyle I've ever aspired to or related to myself. The Magic Theater, which appears in the famous finale, also inspired the name of my old Angel Fire site and current main blog, only I use the spelling M-A-G-I-C-K instead of the usual M-A-G-I-C. As a nod to ritual, supernatural, esoteric magic. I also love the concept of an inner wolf in all of us, analogous to the id, ego, and superego, and the reptilian brain. My only complaint is that the treatise on the Steppenwolf, which appears fairly early on in the novel, feels a bit boring at times. I understand kind of why he felt the need to include that, but, it kind of can drag on a bit and feels a little bit too long. Maybe it would have been better if he just, done a shortened version of it, or a kind of a greatest hit summary, or incorporate things throughout the novel. But again, obviously he was the one who wrote it, and it does work the way it did, even though he does include that treatise, which kind of can make the novel feel a bit slow in the beginning. Rosshalde, published in 1914, is my favorite of Hesse's early novels, and one of his books I read in a single day. It's a beautiful, emotional, touching, gripping story about a marriage falling apart, similar to Hesse's own first marriage, a visit from an old friend, a father's difficult relationship with his older son, and his clear, strong preference for his younger son. And the younger son is also much more, lovable and friendly. The older son is, kind of cold and emotionally distant from his father. and the said younger son's serious illness over the summer, and the life of a painter, which many of those aspects also draw from Hesse's own life besides just the falling apart marriage. Rosshalde is the name of the family's mansion, and I absolutely really love this novel, even though, it's one of the earlier ones. Most people only look at, the greatest ones after, Demian forward. I really enjoy this and cannot recommend it highly enough. Beneath the Wheel, published in 1906, was Hesse's second novel. Like so many of his other books, it's heavily autobiographical, this time drawing from his difficulties at school. The protagonist, Hans, is an academic prodigy, but his education focused solely upon the acquisition of knowledge and an interior life of the mind. Thus, he has a hard time making friends in the real world and forming personal connections to other people when he returns to his village after being expelled from school for bad grades and a mental crack-up. Though he likes his work as a mechanic's apprentice well enough, he never fully adjusts to this life outside of the ivory tower, and that's yet again something I can personally relate to, both what Hesse went through in his own life and what the character Hans goes through. When you're like such a deep intellectual, you only care about, like studying and reading for school, and you're just basically like not associating with peers like barely at all. You really don't understand how your peers actually work, and you have like a difficult time making friends when you're suddenly, no longer in the academic environment, or even when you want to make friends with people who aren't, as like gung-ho serious about like studying and doing schoolwork as you are. Peter Commonson, published in 1904, was Hesse's debut novel. I love the sweet, simple story of a young man leaving his home to find his own path in life and discover who he is. One of the most touching aspects of the novel is Peter's friendship with the old cripple Boppi, whom he was initially physically repelled by, but later became best friends with. During a visit to the zoo, they realize in delight that they switch from Z to do without being aware of it. I really wish English had the formal versus informal form of you, like both singular and plural, that pretty much like all other languages I'm aware of have. So like, for example, like who's a friend, like, or who's like a very close relative, or who's like, for example, your boss, you would only use the formal form of you with unless you become like friends over time, or like, for example, you would almost never use the informal form of you with like someone who's decades older than you, and it's like, like for example, like a grandparent or like a very dear mentor you've known for decades. And like, for example, like in a novel, you can tell when someone is like having a row, or like being mad at someone, or like having a falling out, because they're like suddenly switched to the formal form of you when they always use the informal form of you, and that's just, something unfortunately English language doesn't have. SIDDHARTHA, celebrating its 100th anniversary in 2022, remains Hesse's best-known novel, sometimes the only one non-fans have read or know about. Though it was published in 1922, it only came to the U.S. in translation in 1951, and many of his other novels were not widely available in translation or available in English translation at all until he started becoming more popular throughout the 50s, and then like really hit it big in the 1960s among the hippies and the countercultural movement. It's the story of a young man in ancient Nepal who leaves his home in the hopes of finding spiritual fulfillment and happiness, a common theme among Hesse's novels. His best friend Govinda comes along with him, though they later part ways when Govinda joins Buddha's religious order and SIDDHARTHA chooses to find his own unique path. If you love Buddhism and Eastern philosophy, you'll probably enjoy this book. And I should mention SIDDHARTHA and Narcissus and Goldmund, although, obviously technically historical fiction, like said in the long ago past. They personally like feel more like, like literary fiction, just happens to be in the past. Obviously, they're not full of like anachronisms or things like that. But Hesse was not a historical novelist. He just, happened to set two of his novels in the past, and there are like historical details and such, but you like shouldn't really like look to them if you're like serious about like intense, like hard-hitting, like doorstopper historical fiction. They're just like more literary fiction set in the past. Gertrude, published in 1910, was the second Hesse novel I read, back in the spring of 1995. It's the story of a musician who suffers a paralyzing injury from a tobogganing accident and eventually rises to become a successful composer. He also passionately loves Gertrude, whom he believes could never desire him in return on account of his crippledness. A lovely, moving story about unrequited love and the power of music. Journey to the East, published in 1932, is one of Hesse's most forgettable novels for me. It's about a pilgrimage to the East by some members of a group called the League, which includes some of Hesse's own characters, like Goldmund, Klingsor, who appears in one of Hesse's novellas, and Vasudeva, who appears in SIDDHARTHA, the ferryman, as well as real people like Picasso, Paul Klee, Don Quixote, and Mozart. And like some people who've read Steppenwolf may remember, like Mozart appears in the Magic Theater too. Like Harry grabs his pigtail at one point and like turns into a comet, and Mozart flies away. And like the famous line, "Pablo would be waiting for me," and Mozart too. Sorry for that annoying noise from the road. During their journey, a servant named Leo disappears, and the group dissolves into bickering and anxiety. Years later, the narrator tries to write about this journey, but fails at the endeavor. Then Leo reappears and tells him he has to appear before the High Throne to be judged by the League. And I had to look up the plot summary to write down this for my blog post. I mean, I did remember some of it, the journey fell apart because of bickering among the friends, and they were never the same after that. But I didn't remember most of the rest of that. But when I did see the plot summary, it did kind of come back to me a little. So obviously, it's not my number one least favorite of his novels, or the least memorable for me. So I did like the concept of it. I thought it was a really great concept, both magic and real world combination, and obviously the Eastern philosophy and esotericism and stuff like that. But I just feel the execution kind of fell a little bit flat. Knulp, published in 1915, consists of 3 stories written between 1907 and 1914. It follows a vagrant, Knulp, who merrily flits all over the towns he passes through on his happy-go-lucky travels. The only thing I remember about this book is how it ends. However, at least I enjoyed reading it. Hesse's final novel, The Glass Bead Game, published in 1943, was the only book of his I found a boring chore and slog instead of a page-turning joy. At least he redeemed himself at the end with the 3 live stories and the poetry. Dude, where were you hiding this entire book? This is your usual excellent standard I expect of you, not this boring 400 plus pages that came before it. And I loved Joseph Knecht's friendships with the old music master in Plinio de Signori. I'm far from the only reader who still had no idea by the end how this glass bead game is actually played. I feel like Hesse chose the ending he did because he was out of his league with a book of this length and decided to just pull the plug in media res before it ballooned even more, he realized he created a monster and just, needed to slay it already. Hesse was far more effective with short novels. We should always know our strengths and weaknesses. For example, I excel at writing deliberate door stoppers, at least 90,000 words, if not much, much more, sometimes even beyond 300,000 words. While Hesse was so much better, more skilled and adept at writing very short novels, practically novella length, in the 200-page range, or sometimes Narcissus and Goldmund. I think it's about 320 pages or so in translation. But he was great at short novels, and we should celebrate the lengths we do best at writing. And unfortunately, all of my Hesse novels are in storage 900 miles away, but I will insert a picture of them. Unfortunately, my brother didn't really ship all my belongings down to me, so I'll have to find some other way to get them to myself. So thank you very much for listening to the end. Please leave a comment. I really, really enjoy seeing comments from my viewers and subscribers because I kind of really want to get to know you guys, and also to learn what I should do more of and what I should do less of, and just generally how to improve my channel, and also consider sharing and subscribing if you haven't already, and leaving a like. Although I really, really do like seeing comments more than likes. When I see more likes than comments, it makes me kind of feel like I wasted my time. And so I'll see you guys again very soon, and thank you again for watching. Bye.